Why do people often return when you stop chasing them? It's a question that has puzzled many, and the answer lies in the timeless wisdom of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. This simple yet profound idea reveals a truth about human behavior. When you detach from the need to control or cling, you create a space where natural connections can flourish. In this video, we'll explore how Stoic principles like emotional resilience, cognitive detachment, and the power of presence can transform the way we approach relationships. These ideas aren't just ancient philosophy, they're practical tools for navigating the complexities of modern life. By the end of this journey, you'll see how letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means creating the conditions for genuine connection. So let's dive in and uncover why people often come back when you stop chasing and start living with intention. Stoicism teaches us that true freedom comes from detachment. But what does that really mean? Detachment isn't about not caring or becoming indifferent to the world around us. It's about understanding where our power lies in our own reactions, emotions, and choices. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it this way: "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." In other words, we can't control external events, but we can control how we respond to them. This shift in focus is where real freedom begins. Think about a toxic relationship, for example. You might not be able to control the other person's behavior, but you can choose how you engage with it. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop allowing their actions to dictate your emotional state. By detaching from the outcome, whether they change, stay the same, or leave your life, you reclaim your inner peace. It's not easy, but it's empowering. That's the essence of Stoic detachment, focusing on what's within your control and releasing the rest. So here's a question to reflect on. How often do you let external outcomes dictate your inner peace? Do you find yourself getting caught up in things you can't control, or do you consciously choose to focus on your own reactions? The answers might surprise you, and they might just point you toward a more balanced, freer way of living. Do we ever truly control others' actions? Think about it for a moment. How often have you tried to steer someone's decisions only to find them resisting even more? The Stoics had a profound insight here. Trying to control others is not only futile but often counterproductive. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, taught that much of our suffering comes from trying to change what's beyond our control. And let's be honest, other people's actions, thoughts, and choices, those are almost always outside our sphere of influence. Take a modern example. Imagine trying to force someone to stay in a relationship. You might beg, bargain, or even manipulate, but none of it guarantees they'll stay. In fact, it often has the opposite effect, pushing them further away. Why? Because no one likes to feel controlled. It's human nature to resist when we sense someone trying to dictate our choices. The more you try to hold on, the more they pull back. It's a dynamic as old as time, yet so many of us keep repeating the same patterns, hoping for a different result. But what if you shifted your focus? Instead of trying to control others, what if you poured that energy into mastering yourself? The Stoics believed that true power lies in self-mastery, controlling your own thoughts, emotions, and reactions. When you stop trying to change others and start focusing on your own growth, something remarkable happens. You become less attached to outcomes, less frustrated by what you can't control, and more at peace with the natural flow of life. So here's a question to reflect on. What would change if you stopped trying to control others and focused on yourself? Would your relationships feel lighter, more authentic? Would you feel less burdened by the weight of expectations? It's a simple shift in perspective, but one that can transform how you interact with the world. After all, the only thing you truly control is yourself, and that, the Stoics would argue, is more than enough. Being fully present is a magnet for connection. It's that rare quality that makes people feel seen, heard, and valued, something we all crave deep down. Stoicism, at its core, teaches us to live in the moment, to embrace the here and now without being weighed down by the past or anxious about the future. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." It's a simple yet profound reminder that the only moment we truly have is this one. And when we anchor ourselves in it, we become more authentic, more grounded, and more open to genuine connection. Think about it. How often do we half listen in conversations, distracted by our phones, our to-do lists, or our own thoughts? We're physically there, but mentally elsewhere. Stoicism challenges us to break that habit. When you give someone your full attention, you're not just hearing their words, you're acknowledging their humanity. You're saying, "You matter, this moment matters," and that kind of presence has a magnetic effect. People notice when you're truly there with them, not just nodding along while your mind wanders. Let's take it a step further. Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend who's sharing something deeply personal. Instead of planning your response or thinking about what you'll say next, you simply listen. You're not judging, not interrupting, just being present. That level of attentiveness creates a space where trust and understanding can grow. It's in those moments that relationships deepen, that bonds strengthen. So here's a question to reflect on. When was the last time you truly listened without distraction? Not just to the words, but to the emotions behind them. It's not always easy, especially in a world that constantly pulls us in a dozen directions. But when we practice being present, we not only enrich our own lives, we become a source of calm and connection for others. And isn't that what meaningful relationships are all about? Resilience is the key to thriving in relationships. Think about it. When emotions run high and the stakes feel even higher, it's not about avoiding pain, but about how you endure it. Stoicism teaches us that life's challenges, especially in relationships, aren't meant to break us, they're meant to shape us. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This idea is at the heart of emotional resilience. It's not about suppressing your feelings or pretending everything is fine. It's about facing the storm without letting it sweep you away. Consider this. Imagine someone going through a breakup. Instead of spiraling into anger or despair, they choose to sit with their emotions, process them, and move forward with clarity. They don't chase or beg, they simply let go. And here's the fascinating part. When they least expect it, their partner comes back. Why? Because resilience has a magnetic quality. When you handle emotional setbacks with grace, you show strength, and that strength is irresistible. Now, take a moment to reflect. How do you handle emotional setbacks in your relationships? Do you cling to what's slipping away, or do you trust yourself enough to let go and grow? Stoicism reminds us that we can't control other people's actions, but we can control our response. And that response, rooted in resilience, can transform not just how we navigate relationships, but how others see and respect us. This isn't about becoming emotionless or detached. It's about building an inner stability that allows you to weather any storm. When you cultivate resilience, you don't just survive challenges, you thrive through them. And in doing so, you create a space where relationships can either flourish or return, but always on your terms. What happens when you stop clinging to outcomes? It's a question that might feel uncomfortable at first, especially in a world where we're taught to chase, control, and hold on tightly. But here's the truth: non-attachment isn't about indifference or giving up. It's about creating space for things to unfold as they're meant to. When you release your grip on a specific outcome, you allow relationships to breathe, grow, and evolve in their own time. This is where the art of non-attachment comes into play, a principle deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy. Seneca once said, "You act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire." What he's pointing to is the tension between our human tendency to cling to what we want and the freedom that comes when we let go. Think about it. When you stop trying to force a friendship, a relationship, or even a career path into a box of your expectations, you open the door to something far more authentic. You're no longer bound by the weight of what if or what should be. Instead, you're free to experience what is. Take the story of Sarah, for example. She had a close friend she'd known for years, but over time, their connection started to fade. At first, Sarah panicked. She texted constantly, tried to plan meetups, and even blamed herself for the distance. But the more she chased, the further her friend seemed to drift. Then, one day, she decided to stop. She let go of the need to control the friendship and focused instead on her own growth. Months later, her friend reached out and they reconnected in a way that felt natural and unforced. That's the power of non-attachment. By releasing her grip, Sarah created the space for their bond to flourish on its own terms. So, what would it feel like to release your grip on a specific outcome? It might feel scary at first, like stepping into the unknown, but it also opens the door to a deeper kind of freedom, one where you're no longer held hostage by fear or expectation. When you let go, you're not giving up, you're trusting the process. You're allowing life to unfold in its own time, and often, that's when the most meaningful connections find their way back to you. Stoicism teaches us that self-worth comes from within. It's not about how others see you, but how you see yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This idea is at the heart of Stoic philosophy. Your value isn't determined by external validation, but by the respect and integrity you hold for yourself. When you truly value who you are, others begin to see that light within you too. Think about it this way: when someone stops chasing approval and instead focuses on their own growth and self-respect, something interesting happens. People notice, they sense the quiet confidence, the absence of desperation, and they're drawn to it. Take, for example, someone who spent years trying to win the approval of a friend or partner, only to realize that the more they chased, the further that person seemed to drift. But when they decided to step back, to focus on their own goals and self-worth, something shifted. The person who once seemed distant began to return, not because they were being chased, but because they were drawn to the strength and independence they saw. This isn't about playing games or manipulating others. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't something others can give or take away. It's yours to define. When you stop relying on others to validate you, you reclaim your power, and that power is magnetic. So, here's a question to consider. Do you rely on others to define your worth? Or do you see yourself as enough, just as you are? The truth is, when you stop seeking validation and start standing firm in your own value, you create a space where others can't help but respect and appreciate you. It's not about forcing their hand, it's about letting them see the strength you already possess. And that, in itself, is a powerful form of attraction. Why does wanting something less often make it come to you? It's a question that seems counterintuitive at first, but it lies at the heart of Stoic philosophy. The more we cling to a desire, the more we risk pushing it away. This is what the Stoics called the paradox of desire. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic thinkers, warned us about this very thing when he said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life." It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. In other words, when we fixate too much on what we want, we lose sight of what we can actually control, our own actions and mindset. Think about it like this: when you're desperate for something, whether it's a relationship, a job, or even approval from others, that desperation can seep into your behavior. You might come across as needy, anxious, or overly eager, and that energy can repel the very thing you're chasing. But when you let go of that tight grip, when you stop trying to force outcomes, something interesting happens. You become more grounded, more present, and more authentic, and often that's when life surprises you. Take the story of Sarah, for example. She had been chasing a promotion at work for years, constantly stressing over every detail, trying to prove herself at every turn. But no matter how hard she worked, the promotion always seemed just out of reach. Eventually, exhausted and frustrated, she decided to shift her focus. Instead of obsessing over the promotion, she began to pour her energy into doing her best work without attachment to the outcome. She stopped worrying about what her bosses thought and started focusing on what she could control: her effort, her attitude, and her growth. Within months, the promotion she had stopped chasing actually came to her. Why? Because her indifference to the outcome allowed her to operate from a place of calm confidence, and that energy was magnetic. So, what about you? What is it that you desire so much that it might be pushing it away? Is it a relationship, a dream, or maybe even peace of mind? The Stoics would tell you that the key isn't to give up on your desires entirely, but to approach them with a sense of detachment. When you stop clutching so tightly, you create space for things to unfold naturally. It's not about indifference in the sense of not caring. It's about caring deeply, but not letting that care consume you. That's the balance the Stoics teach us to strive for. Healthy boundaries are a Stoic practice, and they are far more than just saying no to others. They are about saying yes to yourself. When you set clear limits, you demonstrate self-respect, and interestingly, this often invites respect from others in return. Seneca once said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." This isn't just about patience, it's about self-discipline. By pausing before reacting, you create space to decide what truly aligns with your values and what doesn't. Boundaries are that pause. They give you the clarity to choose what serves you and what doesn't. Think about it this way: when you set a boundary, you're not building walls to keep people out. You're drawing lines that show others how to treat you. Let's take an example. Imagine someone who was constantly overwhelmed because they said yes to every request at work or in their personal life. Over time, they felt drained and undervalued. But when they finally set boundaries, whether it was saying no to extra tasks or carving out time for themselves, something shifted. People began to see them differently. They returned with more consideration, more respect, and even admiration for their clarity and strength. This isn't about control or manipulation, it's about alignment. By setting boundaries, you communicate your worth, and that often inspires others to rise to the occasion. So where do you need stronger boundaries in your life? Is it in your relationships, your work, or even the way you talk to yourself? Boundaries aren't just external, they're internal too. They're about protecting your energy, your time, and your peace. Ask yourself, what's one area where you've been giving too much of yourself without getting enough in return? Remember, boundaries are not selfish, they're self-full. They allow you to show up as your best self, not just for others but for you. And when you do that, you might just find that the people who truly value you will come back, not out of obligation, but because they respect the person you've become. What happens when you stop rushing and start waiting? It's a question worth pondering, especially in a world that often feels like it's moving at breakneck speed. Stoicism teaches us that patience is far more than just waiting around. It's a profound form of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most renowned Stoic thinkers, once said, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it." This idea reminds us that waiting isn't passive. It's an active practice of aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life, rather than forcing outcomes through haste or anxiety. Think about it. How often do we rush into decisions, relationships, or reactions, only to regret them later? Patience, in the Stoic sense, is about stepping back, observing, and allowing time to reveal what's truly important. It's not about inaction, but about intentional calmness, a deliberate choice to let things unfold as they should. Consider a situation where someone, instead of pushing for immediate answers or closure in a strained relationship, chose to wait patiently. Over time, their calm demeanor allowed the other person to reflect, soften, and eventually return with a more open heart. That's the transformative power of patience. So, how can patience reshape your relationships? When you stop demanding instant results or quick fixes, you create space for trust and understanding to grow. Patience shows others that you value the relationship enough to give it time, rather than forcing it into a mold it doesn't fit. It's a quiet strength that speaks volumes, a way of saying, "I'm here and I'm willing to wait for what's real." In a world that often prioritizes speed over depth, patience becomes a rare and invaluable gift, both to yourself and to those around you. Acceptance is the gateway to peace. These words hold a profound truth, especially when we explore them through the lens of Stoicism. At its core, Stoicism teaches us that peace doesn't come from controlling everything around us. It comes from accepting what we cannot change. This isn't about resignation or defeat. It's about freeing ourselves from the endless struggle against reality. As Epictetus once said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." It's a reminder that life will unfold as it will, and our power lies in how we respond. Consider this: when you let go of the need to control outcomes, you create space for something unexpected, and often something better, to emerge. Take the example of someone who went through a painful breakup. Instead of holding on to resentment or trying to force reconciliation, they chose to accept the situation as it was. They focused on their own growth, their own peace, and in time, something remarkable happened. Their ex, seeing the change in them, reached out to reconnect. The very act of letting go created the conditions for a new beginning. But acceptance isn't just about relationships, it's about life itself. What are you struggling to accept right now? Is it a situation at work, a personal loss, or perhaps a dream that didn't go as planned? The Stoic approach invites us to pause and ask ourselves, what can I control here and what must I accept? When we stop fighting against the current and instead learn to flow with it, we often find that what we thought was a loss becomes a stepping stone to something greater. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's choosing peace over resistance, and in that choice we often find freedom. Why are independent people so attractive? There's something magnetic about someone who stands firmly on their own, unshaken by external validation or the need for approval. Stoicism has long celebrated this quality, teaching that true strength comes from self-sufficiency. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: "The wise man is neither raised up by prosperity nor cast down by adversity, for he has always endeavored to rely chiefly upon himself." This independence isn't just about surviving without others. It's about thriving in a way that inspires those around you. Think about it. When someone radiates confidence and inner stability, they don't chase relationships or approval. Instead, they focus on their own growth, their own values, and their own purpose. And paradoxically, this is what pulls others toward them. It's not about being aloof or distant. It's about being so grounded in yourself that others can't help but notice. They see someone who isn't swayed by the chaos of the world, and it's captivating. Take, for example, a friend who decided to stop chasing after a toxic relationship. Instead of begging for attention or trying to fix things, they chose to focus on their own well-being. pursuing hobbies, building a career, and cultivating a sense of inner peace. Over time, the person who had walked away began to see them in a new light. The independence and self-respect they displayed became irresistible. It wasn't about games or manipulation. It was about the power of living authentically. So, how can you cultivate more independence in your own life? Start by identifying where you might be relying too much on external validation. Are you constantly checking for likes or approval? Do you feel incomplete without someone else's presence? Stoicism teaches us to shift that focus inward, build a life that feels fulfilling on its own terms. Develop skills, set personal goals, and learn to enjoy your own company. When you become your own source of strength and joy, you'll naturally attract others, not because you need them, but because they want to be part of the energy you radiate. Independence isn't about pushing people away. It's about creating a solid foundation within yourself. And when you do, you'll find that the right people are drawn to that strength, not just for a moment, but for the long haul. Gratitude transforms relationships. It's a simple truth, but one that Stoicism holds at its core. When we focus on appreciating what we already have, rather than fixating on what we lack, something remarkable happens. Relationships deepen, connections strengthen, and the people in our lives feel valued. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest voices, once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This isn't just poetic wisdom, it's a call to action. Gratitude shifts our perspective, grounding us in the present and reminding us of the abundance we already possess. Think about it. How often do we take the people closest to us for granted? We get so caught up in what's missing, what they're not doing, what we wish they would do, that we lose sight of their value. Stoicism challenges us to flip that script. By practicing gratitude, we begin to see the small, everyday acts of kindness, the quiet support, and the moments of connection that might otherwise go unnoticed. And when we express that gratitude, it has a ripple effect. People feel seen and appreciated, and that often leads to a stronger, more meaningful bond. Consider this example. A friend of mine once found herself frustrated with her partner. They were stuck in a cycle of misunderstandings and resentment. But instead of focusing on what was going wrong, she decided to try something different. Every day, she wrote down one thing she was grateful for about him, whether it was the way he made her laugh, how he always remembered her favorite coffee order, or just the fact that he was there. Over time, she started sharing these notes with him. What happened? The tension began to dissolve. He felt valued, and in turn, he started reciprocating that appreciation. Their relationship didn't just improve, it transformed. This isn't just about romantic relationships either. Gratitude can mend friendships, strengthen family ties, and even improve workplace dynamics. When we take the time to acknowledge the good in others, we create an environment where positivity thrives. So, here's a question to reflect on. What are you grateful for in your relationships? It could be something big, like unwavering support during a tough time, or something small, like a shared laugh over a silly joke. When you focus on those moments, you'll find that gratitude has a way of opening doors, not just to stronger connections, but to a deeper sense of fulfillment in your own life. How does overthinking sabotage your connections? It's a question worth exploring because in relationships, overthinking often acts like a silent thief, stealing clarity, creating unnecessary tension, and pushing people away without you even realizing it. Stoicism offers a powerful antidote to this habit. It teaches us to focus on what's within our control and let go of the rest. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it simply, "We are disturbed not by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens." In other words, it's not the situation itself that causes stress or conflict, it's the stories we tell ourselves about it. Overthinking amplifies those stories, turning small misunderstandings into mountains of doubt and insecurity. Take, for example, someone who constantly second-guesses every text, every conversation, every gesture. They might interpret a delayed response as rejection or read into a casual comment as criticism. Over time, this habit creates a barrier not because the other person is pulling away, but because the overthinker is unknowingly pushing them away. It's exhausting for both sides. But what happens when you stop overanalyzing? One person shared how they decided to let go of their constant need to dissect every interaction. Instead of obsessing over what their partner might be thinking, they focused on being present and trusting the connection. The result, their relationship became lighter, more authentic, and far more fulfilling. What would happen if you stopped overthinking your relationships? Imagine the freedom of not constantly worrying about whether you said the right thing or if they truly meant what they said. Think about the energy you'd reclaim, energy you could pour into building stronger, more meaningful connections. Stoicism reminds us that overthinking is a choice, and like any habit, it can be unlearned. By practicing mindfulness and focusing on the present moment, you can break the cycle and create space for healthier, more honest relationships. It's not about ignoring your feelings or pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing when your thoughts are spiraling and choosing to step back, breathe, and focus on what's real here and now. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. In the chaos of life, where noise often drowns out clarity, Stoicism teaches us the profound strength of quiet reflection. The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage, and part of that courage lies in knowing when to step back, when to let silence do the talking." It's not about avoiding conflict or giving up. It's about understanding that silence can be a powerful tool for connection, clarity, and even reconciliation. Consider this: when tensions rise and emotions flare, words can become weapons. But when we choose silence, we create space. Space for the other person to reflect, for emotions to settle, and for understanding to grow. Imagine a couple in the middle of an argument. One person, frustrated and overwhelmed, decides to stop arguing. Instead of continuing to push their point, they simply step back and let silence fill the room. Over time, that silence becomes a bridge. The other person, no longer met with resistance, begins to soften. The relationship starts to heal, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. This is the Stoic approach to conflict: not to dominate or win, but to preserve harmony and inner peace. Silence, in this sense, isn't passive. It's an intentional act of self-control, a reminder that we don't always need to have the last word. And often, it's this very restraint that draws people back. When we let go of the need to prove ourselves, we open the door for others to see us and themselves more clearly. Think about your own life for a moment. Can you recall a time when silence helped you navigate a difficult situation? Maybe it was during a heated discussion at work, or perhaps a moment of tension with a loved one. What happened when you chose not to react, not to fill the air with words? Chances are that silence created an opportunity for understanding that words alone couldn't achieve. Stoicism reminds us that true strength isn't found in loud declarations or constant engagement. It's in the quiet moments, the pauses, the spaces between words where real connection happens. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where words seem to only add fuel to the fire, consider the power of silence. It might just be the most eloquent thing you can do. What happens when you truly let go? It's a question that might feel counterintuitive at first. After all, we're often taught to fight for what we want, to hold on tightly, to never give up. But Stoicism offers a different perspective, one that reveals the surprising power of release. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. What he's pointing to is the freedom that comes when we stop trying to control what's beyond our grasp. When we let go, we're not giving up, we're creating space for something unexpected to return. Think about it this way: have you ever held onto a grudge only to realize how much energy it was draining from you? There's a story of a man who carried resentment toward a friend for years. He felt wronged, and that feeling festered, keeping him stuck in a cycle of anger. But one day, he decided to let it go, not because the other person deserved forgiveness, but because he deserved peace. What happened next was unexpected. The friend, sensing the shift, reached out to reconnect. Their relationship didn't return to what it once was, but it evolved into something new, something healthier. Letting go didn't just free him, it opened the door to possibility. So, what are you holding onto that you need to release? Is it a relationship that's run its course? A dream that no longer serves you? Or maybe it's the need to control every outcome in your life. Stoicism reminds us that our power lies not in forcing things to happen, but in how we respond to what happens. When we loosen our grip, we often find that what we thought we'd lose comes back to us in ways we couldn't have imagined. The act of letting go isn't about losing, it's about trusting the process of life. And sometimes that's where the real magic begins. Forgiveness is a Stoic virtue, one that often goes overlooked in our quest for self-mastery. It's not just about letting go of anger or resentment, it's about reclaiming your peace and opening the door to reconciliation. When we hold onto grudges, we chain ourselves to the past, allowing others to control our emotions. But forgiveness breaks those chains. As Epictetus once said, "Forgiveness is better than revenge, for forgiveness is the sign of a gentle nature, but revenge is the sign of a savage nature." In those words, you can hear the Stoic emphasis on inner strength, choosing to rise above hurt rather than being consumed by it. Think about a time when someone wronged you. Maybe it was a friend who betrayed your trust or a colleague who undermined you. Holding on to that pain might feel justified, even satisfying in the moment, but over time it becomes a burden. Now consider this: what if you chose to forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve to be free from the weight of that resentment? Forgiveness doesn't mean excusing their behavior or pretending it never happened. It simply means releasing the hold it has on you. Take the story of a man who forgave his estranged father after years of neglect. For decades, he carried bitterness, convinced that his father didn't deserve a second chance. But when he finally chose to forgive, something remarkable happened. The act of forgiveness didn't just heal old wounds, it opened the door to a renewed relationship. They began to rebuild trust, one conversation at a time. What started as an act of letting go turned into an opportunity for deeper connection. So who do you need to forgive in your life? It might be someone close to you, or it could even be yourself. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, it's about choosing to move forward with clarity and purpose. When you let go of the need to hold on to pain, you create space for growth, understanding, and even love. And in doing so, you embody one of the most profound Stoic virtues: forgiveness as an act of strength, not weakness. How does vulnerability build trust? At first glance, it might seem counterintuitive. After all, vulnerability often feels like exposing our weaknesses, our fears, the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden. But in the Stoic tradition, vulnerability is not a weakness, it's an act of courage. Seneca once said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it is because we do not dare that they are difficult." In other words, the very act of opening up, of showing our true selves, is where our strength lies. It's a declaration that we are unafraid to be seen as we are, flaws and all. And here's the profound truth: when we show up authentically, we give others permission to do the same. Think about a time when someone shared something deeply personal with you. Maybe it was a friend admitting they were struggling, or a colleague confessing they felt overwhelmed. Didn't that moment of honesty create a deeper connection? Didn't it make you want to extend compassion, to meet them where they were? Vulnerability has this incredible power to bridge gaps, to dissolve barriers, and to foster genuine trust. It's a reminder that we're all human, all navigating the same uncertainties, and all capable of empathy. Consider the story of Marcus, a Stoic philosopher who, despite his teachings on self-discipline, openly grieved the loss of his child. He didn't hide his pain or mask it with Stoic indifference. Instead, he allowed himself to feel deeply, to mourn openly, and in doing so, he didn't lose respect or admiration, he gained it. People saw his humanity, his courage to feel, and it drew them closer. They returned not with judgment, but with empathy and understanding. So, how can you embrace vulnerability in your own relationships? Start by letting go of the need to appear perfect. Share your struggles, your doubts, even your failures. It doesn't have to be dramatic or all-encompassing. Small acts of openness can create ripples of connection. When you allow yourself to be seen, you invite others to meet you with their own authenticity. And in that space of mutual honesty, trust grows. Vulnerability isn't about losing control. It's about finding strength in the courage to be real. Equanimity is the Stoic path to balance, a steady, unshakable calm that allows you to navigate life's ups and downs with grace. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. Instead, it's about cultivating a deep inner stability, a quiet strength that keeps you grounded no matter what storms rage around you. And here's the surprising truth: this kind of balance doesn't just serve you, it draws others toward you. People are naturally drawn to those who remain composed, who don't react impulsively or let emotions spiral out of control. There's a magnetism in balance, a kind of quiet confidence that makes others feel safe and inspired in your presence. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's most famous practitioners, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." What he's pointing to here is the essence of equanimity, the ability to focus on what you can control, your thoughts, your reactions, your choices, and let go of what you can't. When you practice this, you become a beacon of calm in a chaotic world. Imagine being in a heated argument with someone, and instead of matching their energy, you choose to stay composed. You listen, you respond thoughtfully, not reactively. Over time, that person begins to see you differently, as someone they can trust, someone who doesn't escalate conflict but diffuses it. Relationships often improve not because you've changed the other person, but because you've changed how you show up. Take, for example, a situation where two colleagues are locked in a disagreement. One remains calm, refusing to let frustration take over. They listen, acknowledge the other's perspective, and respond with clarity rather than emotion. Over time, the dynamic shifts. The person who stayed composed becomes a voice of reason, someone others turn to in difficult moments. Equanimity, in this case, didn't just preserve the relationship, it strengthened it. So, how can you cultivate more equanimity in your life? It starts with small, intentional practices. Notice when emotions rise and pause before reacting. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Can I respond in a way that aligns with my values? Over time, these moments of pause become habits, and those habits become your default way of being. Equanimity isn't about perfection, it's about progress. And as you grow in this practice, you'll find that not only do you feel more balanced, but the people around you will notice it too. They'll be drawn to the calm you carry, the steadiness you bring to every situation, and in that space, relationships can flourish. What happens when you stop reacting and start responding? This is one of the most transformative questions Stoicism asks us to consider. At its core, Stoicism teaches us to pause, reflect, and act with intention rather than being swept away by emotions in the heat of the moment. It's not about suppressing how you feel, but about choosing how to respond in a way that aligns with your values and long-term goals. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that while we can't always control external events, we always have control over our responses. A measured response, grounded in reason, has the power to diffuse conflict, build understanding, and even repair relationships that seem broken. Take, for example, a story of two friends who had a falling out over a misunderstanding. One of them, let's call her Sarah, felt hurt and reacted impulsively, lashing out in anger. The other, Emily, chose to step back and reflect. Instead of firing back with more emotion, Emily waited until the storm of anger passed. She then approached Sarah with a calm, thoughtful response, acknowledging her friend's feelings without escalating the situation. Over time, this non-reactive approach allowed them to rebuild trust and strengthen their friendship in ways they hadn't imagined. So, how can you practice non-reactivity in your own relationships? Start by creating space between the trigger and your response. When emotions rise, take a deep breath or even step away for a moment if you need to. Ask yourself, is my reaction serving me, or is it making things worse? By doing this, you give yourself the chance to respond with clarity and purpose, rather than being driven by impulse. It's a small shift, but one that can lead to profound changes in how you connect with others, and how they come back to you time and again because they feel heard, respected, and valued. Stoicism teaches us to embrace change not as something to fear, but as a natural and inevitable part of life. Seneca once wrote, "Everything that happens is as habitual and familiar as a rose in spring or fruit in summer. The same applies to disease, death, slander, intrigue, and all things that delight or trouble foolish men." What he's pointing to here is the beauty of impermanence, the idea that nothing stays the same, and that's precisely what makes life so rich and dynamic. When we resist change, we cling to what's familiar, but when we accept it, we open ourselves to growth, renewal, and even unexpected returns. Think about this. Relationships are one of the most common areas where we struggle with impermanence. We want things to stay the same, to remain comfortable and predictable. But what happens when we let go of that need for control? Consider a story of two friends who grew apart over time. One of them, instead of clinging to the way things used to be, accepted that their paths had diverged. They let go, not out of anger or resentment, but with grace and understanding. Years later, when their lives aligned once more, the friendship returned, not as it was before, but stronger and more authentic. By embracing impermanence, they created space for something deeper to emerge. This isn't just about relationships, though. It's about how we approach every aspect of our lives. When we stop fighting against the tides of change, we stop exhausting ourselves. We begin to see endings not as losses, but as opportunities for new beginnings. Impermanence isn't something to fear, it's something to work with. So, how can you start embracing impermanence in your own life? Take a moment to reflect on where you might be holding on too tightly. Is there a situation or relationship where you're resisting change? What might happen if you loosened your grip even just a little? Remember, letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means making room for something new to grow. And sometimes what comes back to you is more beautiful than what you initially let go of. So, what does it all come down to? Why do people always seem to come back when you let them go? The answer lies in the timeless wisdom of Stoicism. At its core, Stoicism teaches us the power of detachment, not as a form of indifference, but as a way to free ourselves from the emotional chains that bind us. When you let go, you're not abandoning someone, you're choosing to release control, to stop forcing outcomes, and to trust the natural flow of life. This act of surrender, rooted in Stoic resilience, often has a profound effect. It creates space for growth, for reflection, and for genuine connection to flourish on its own terms. But it's not just about detachment. Stoicism also emphasizes the importance of presence, of being fully grounded in the here and now. When you stop obsessing over what might happen or what someone else might do, you reclaim your energy. You become more centered, more authentic, and more magnetic. And that's the kind of energy people are drawn to. They sense your inner peace, your stability, and your ability to thrive regardless of external circumstances. It's not about playing games or manipulating outcomes. It's about embodying a state of being that inspires others to rise to the same level. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest voices, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This quote captures the essence of what we've explored today. When you focus on what you can control, your thoughts, your actions, your responses, you unlock a profound sense of inner peace. And that peace, more than anything else, is what draws people back. They see in you a reflection of what they aspire to: calm, clarity, and unwavering self-assurance. Now, I want to leave you with this question. How can you apply these Stoic principles in your own life? Whether it's in relationships, work, or personal challenges, think about where you might be holding on too tightly. What would it look like to let go, to trust the process, and to focus on cultivating your own inner strength? Take a moment to reflect on that, and if you feel inspired, share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and learn from one another. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more insights on Stoicism and living a life of purpose. Remember, the journey to inner peace is a continuous one, and every step you take brings you closer to the best version of yourself. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay grounded, stay resilient, and keep moving forward.